Hello everybody, this is Josh Maul, and welcome to part 2 of the electric guitar modeling tutorial series here on Blender Cookie. In part 1, we looked at modeling all of the wooden aspects of the guitar, so at this point we're going to be taking a look at all of the guitar hardware. Well, actually, let me clarify, not all of the guitar hardware. It turns out there's a lot of little bits and pieces all over this thing, and it was taking way too long to try to go through each one and get it all done in a timely manner without rushing too much and just skimping over a lot of the detail that I would rather, not skip over. So I've decided to split the hardware into two parts of its own. So this first part, which is actually part 2 of the overall series, is going to be modeling all of the hardware that's attached to the guitar body. So that includes all the pickups, knobs, etc. The third part now is going to be all of the hardware that is connected to the neck. So we'll be doing all of the frets, the tuning keys, and also getting the strings set up at that point, and making any final minor adjustments to the modeling of the overall guitar to get it ready for texturing, which is now going to be part 4. So I know you guys are really anxious to get this next part out, so I apologize that we had to split it up, but I'd rather give you guys a quality tutorial rather than, just rushing through it and leaving you guys scratching your heads. So I hope you're okay with the decision. If you're not, well, we already did it, so it's too late. Sorry. But with that being said, let's jump in and start modeling this guitar hardware. Alright, so at the end of part 1, this is where we left off with the guitar body and neck modeled and ready for our hardware. In this part we're going to be just focusing on this part of the hardware here, the part that's actually on the guitar body. So I'm actually going to grab this neck, move it to another layer by hitting M and just picking another layer. That way it's just kind of out of our way. Alright. So we're going to start with this middle section here and get both the pickups and both pieces of the bridge out of the way first. So before I get started, I'm going to load in a reference image that I took. I actually took a photo of my guitar to give us a little better idea of how these are put together and how they're fit on the guitar itself. So I'm going to grab this bottom left-hand corner and just drag it over, split my view, and then change this view from a 3D view to a UV image editor. Go down to Image, Open Image, and I'll find my references here. That's the one. And this is just a photo I took of my actual guitar that I based this one off of, and it just gives us a little better view of all these pieces and how they fit together. And also, these are my shoes. So, there you go. Alright, I'm going to start with these pickups, and mainly because, they're kind of the central part of the whole deal, and also, they're fairly easy. So I'm going to hit Shift-A, add in a cube. And with the cube selected, going to hit G to move it, Z to lock it to the Z axis, and just drag it up about like so. Tab to go into edit mode, and A to deselect everything. I'm going to hit B to bring up my box select tool, and click and drag to select this whole bottom row here. I'm going to hit G and Z again, just kind of drag these up till it matches our reference image back behind us there. Do the same thing with the top and with the sides by hitting G and then X to move it just along the X axis. Something like that. And I'm also going to, obviously this is not how it looks. So I'm going to grab this back face here, hit G and then Y, and just bring it up about something like this. Alright. Now if we look at our reference image here, we can see that the inner part of the pickups here is pretty rounded on all edges pretty evenly. Now we could add in a subsurf modifier and add in a bunch of edge loops to tighten these edges up how we want, but since they're all pretty uniform all the way around, I'm actually going to do this just using the bevel tool. So I'm going to select everything, hit Control B, and if I drag my mouse back and forth, you can see it adds a beveled edge all the way around, and it's even all the way around, which is nice. But it is a little bit flat and polygonal. But there's a new feature added in Blender, one of the recent additions, where if you scroll up with your mouse wheel, you can see it adds geometry in there to smooth out that bevel. Now I'm going to scroll up twice to add 2 extra loop cuts in there, and get it something like this. We'll be okay. And then just left click when you get it how you want it. And there we go. Now if we tab out and we add a smooth shader to this, you can see we don't even need a subsurf modifier, which is nice because we're not adding any unnecessary geometry in the center area here, just where we need it to smooth up those edges. Alright, so let's go ahead and add in this little frame for our pickup here. I'm going to start off the same way, adding in a cube, hitting G and Z to pull it up along the Z-axis, tab into edit mode, B for the box select to grab these bottom vertices, move them, the top vertices, and move them. Move these in along the X-axis, just kind of basically lining it up with the reference image. But I do want to adjust it so that the gap here and here are roughly the same. So I'm just going to move this up along the Z-axis a little bit until they're about even. Something like that. Alright. Now we have this little cutout area that we need to get in there. So let's add a couple edge loops in here by hitting Control R and then left clicking, and then you can drag and place the edge loop where you want it. And we want to place it just to the outside of our pickup. So we'll hit Control R, add another one in, drag it out to about there. Control R, add that one there, and one more down at the bottom. Okay, and one thing we forgot to do, let's grab this whole back face here and pull it in along the Y-axis, something like so, and then we'll grab everything and move it along the Y-axis, something like this, because we can see that the center part of the pickup here is elevated just a tad above the frame here. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to jump to face select mode and select just this face here underneath where our pickup actually is. Hit E to extrude, Y to lock it to the Y axis, and just bring it in a little bit to give us that cutout there. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now for this one, since it's not an even bevel all the way around like it was on the inside part of the pickup here, I am going to go ahead and use the subsurf modifier to get the roundness that we want. So I'm just going to hit Control 2, and it will automatically add the subsurf modifier with 2 levels of subdivision. And it looks okay, but if we click on our pickup here and hide it, we can see we have a little bit of a soap dish look going on in here. We don't want that. So what I'm going to do is add in a few edge loops. I'm going to add one here and drag it over, and you can see it just kind of tightens up those corners a little bit. Something like this. Do the same thing along the middle here, or along the inside edge. Alright, and we're going to add an edge loop here and here to tighten up those corners. Okay, and we can see here that the edge right along here is pretty sharp. So we're going to add an edge loop along the outside edge here and just really sharpen it up. Same thing down here. Alright. Add a smooth shader to that, hit Alt-H to unhide my pickup there, and there we go. That looks pretty good. I mean, obviously it's not quite as rounded in some of these corners, but that, I think that looks good. I think that looks pretty good. Alright, now let's talk about these screws that we have here. We've got 3 different kinds of screws on these pickups. We have these flat Phillips head screws, we've got these bulbous Phillips head screws, and then these slightly rounded flathead screws. And one cool thing is we're going to make all 3 of them using the exact same technique, or at least pretty close. So I'm going to hit Shift A, I'm going to add in a circle. But I want to change it from 32 vertices down to 12. Alright, going to rotate along the X-axis by hitting R and then X, and then just hitting 90 and Enter, and it will give us a perfect 90-degree rotation. And I'm just going to grab it out along the Y-axis, pull it out in front of everything, just so we can kind of see what we're doing. So now we can grab this, move it up here or something. Going to hit Tab to go into edit mode. And I'm going to scale it down. Oops, I'm scaling along my 3D cursor. I'm going to change my pivot point to median point. I'm going to scale this down until it gets about the size we want for the screw. Pretty small for these. Now, in order to get this shape, to get this this little cross out of here and this little guy here, what we're going to do is I'm going to select two faces that are directly across from each other, or two edges, I'm sorry, that are directly across from each other, and hit F to just fill a face in between them. Then I'm going to add two edge loops by hitting Control R and then scrolling up once on the mouse wheel to add two edge loops. Just click to add those. Select these two faces, hit F to fill, these two, F to fill. I'm going to select both of these, scale them. Actually, I'm going to leave them like they are. But I am going to select these four edges here, hit F, these four to hit F, these four, and then these four. And now we have a circle here with basically these face loops in place so that we can easily add these little cutouts here. Now, before I get any farther, I'm going to tab out of edit mode. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate this, and Shift D to duplicate it again, and we're going to use this basic setup to create all three of these different kinds of screws. So the first one, we'll just do this flat screw here. Going to go to face select mode. Going to actually grab these four faces here. Actually, if we take a look, we can see that this is, there's an outside edge along the screw around this little indentation. So before we get too far, going to, by holding down Alt and Shift and clicking on these outside edges, select all of those, hit E to extrude, right click just to drop it in place, and then S and scale it out, something like this. Okay, now we can go into face select mode, select this cross shape that we have here, and if we hit E to extrude and then Y, just pull it in along the Y axis, there we have screw number one. Our flathead screw that's just nice and, or our Phillips head screw that is nice and flat, nice and flush. Alright, let's jump over to our next guy here. Toggle wireframe, it's a little easier to see what we're doing here. This one is, we're going to do this sort of bulbous screw. And we're going to do something similar here. We're going to grab this outside edge, E to extrude, right click to just drop it, S to scale, and this one we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to grab the cross shape, E to extrude, Y to extrude it along the Y axis. I'm going to select this entire outer edge here, and I'm going to turn on my proportional editing by either hitting O or going down here to the proportional editing drop down menu and enabling it. I'm going to hit G and then Y, and if I scroll way in with my mouse here, you can see this little circle that is basically the area of influence for this action. So the tighter in it is, the less it's affecting the other geometry. The more I expand it, the more it's affecting the other geometry. So by using this, we're going to pull it along the Y axis, something like so, just to kind of get that shape that we want. That looks pretty good. Alright, and then I'm just going to hit E to extrude, Y to extrude along the Y axis one more time, just to give it that nice bulbous shape. Alright, so that looks pretty good for that one. For our next set of screws here, we have sort of a slightly rounded, just a flathead screw. So I'm going to tab out of edit mode, select our third screw here, just move it over a little bit, tab into edit mode, and this one we can see that the notch here goes almost the whole length of the screw. So rather than adding this extra edge around it, we're going to basically leave it as it is. Go to face select mode. I'm just going to select just these three faces. Hit E to extrude, Y to pull it in along the Y axis. And there we have our flathead screw, but we have these two extra faces that it creates. I'm just going to hit X, delete faces. And so far so good, not looking too bad, but we need a little bit of depth here. Well, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go into edge select mode, select these three and then these three, and I'm going to turn on my snapping tool and set the snapping element to vertex. Going to hit E to extrude, Y to lock it to the Y axis, and then snap it to one of these back vertices here. And what that's going to do is it's going to extrude it to exactly the same point. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and turn off my proportional editing as well, just in case. Now I can grab this edge and this edge, create a face, and fill that in just like that. And now we have this looking pretty good. I'm going to select this entire loop here, extrude it along the y-axis just to give us a little bit of a lip there. And now I'm going to turn my proportional editing back on. Going to, with this back edge loop still selected, hit S to scale, and just play with the proportional editing a little bit till I kind of get the look that I want. And that's looking pretty good. So now we have our 3 different screws all set up and ready to go. However, we got a little problem with these 2 here. That being that they're very geometrical looking. You know, we don't really want to see all the little faces. Well, we're going to run into a slight problem here if we just add a smooth shader to these. And you'll notice that the smooth shader, it smooths out these faces, but it looks weird once it gets to the notches. It doesn't look like like it should. And that's because it's applying the smooth shader even across these edges here, which we don't really want. We want it to be nice and sharp like this, you know. Well, to fix this, let's select one of the screws. We're going to add an edge split modifier. And what that's going to do, as you can see, it applies a smooth shader on any angles that are this angle or less, I believe. So right now, the angles between the faces on this front part are less than 30 degrees, so it's smooth shaded, whereas once we get to this point, it's greater than 30 degrees, so it still allows for a sharp edge there. And we can turn this up to get it how we want it. Keep going up. I think that's how we're going to want it. We want smooth shading all the way around the outside, but keeping the notched area nice and sharp. So we're going to do the same thing here, add a modifier, edge split, and this one looks pretty good just as it is. Alright, so now that our screws are set up and ready to go, let's get them in place. We'll grab this first one, the flat Phillips head screw, goes here, and you'll notice that on the reference images they're actually inset into the pickup. Now, I'm not going to be worrying too much about that. If you were going for an exact replication of a guitar and it was going to have a lot of zoomed in angles and stuff, you could do that. It could be done actually modeling these holes. You could do it with a bump texture if you wanted to. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to put the screw here, and actually I'm going to tab into edit mode on this and give it just a little bit of a lip by hitting E to extrude and just pulling out this edge just a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to grab this and just move it down, get it about how I want it, scale it down a little bit, something like this. Hit G and then Y to pull it in and just kind of get it towards resting on the outside of our casing there. And then by just hitting Shift D to duplicate it, just moving it around and fitting it on the other corners, just like that. Okay, now I'm going to grab this other screw here, our bulbous Phillips head screw. I'm going to just put it down here, and it's actually quite a bit smaller than the other screw here, so I'm going to scale it down, put it about there. Shift D to duplicate it, put it one on the other side. I'm going to grab before I grab that one, let's move these so that they're resting again right on the casing there. Something like so. Okay. I'm going to grab our third screw, move it down right about here. And since this one is spaced evenly all the way across here, I'm going to do that with an array modifier. So I'm just going to add an array modifier, bump the count up to 6, and then I'm going to adjust the offset until this end one is lined up about where it needs to be. Just like that. Hit G to grab, Y to pull it in, and just put it right on the face of that. And there we have our pickup is done and done. I'm going to go ahead and select all of this, deselect the guitar, we don't want that. Hit Shift D and then Z, duplicate this down like this, rotate it around 180 degrees, line it up here, and there we have both of our pickups are finished. Now we just need to fit them on the actual guitar body itself. So I'll select this one, hit G and Y, pull it here, and you'll notice that the guitar body has this is where it starts to have that kind of bulge out. So we're going to be rotating these around, because actually even the neck, when we get in the next part, we'll be adjusting this a little bit. We're going to have our bridge here is going to be sticking out to about here. The strings are going to be hitting it and then sloping down and then down the neck. So there's actually going to be a downward angle from this point down to the top of the neck. So we're going to make all of our hardware on the guitar reflect that look. Something like that will work. We'll grab this one, G and then Y, and rotate it, kind of try to match that angle. Okay, and that will do for now. If we need to make some minor adjustments, we can do that. Once we get the strings on, we're going to go through and tweak all of these things to get them lined up just how we want them. But for right now, that will work. Alright, so let's take a look at this bridge. Now this bridge comes in two pieces. We've got this piece here that the strings are actually hitting, and that's kind of the actual end point as far as the vibration of the string goes. They go to this point, and then this just kind of secures them in place down here. So we're going to model this upper piece first. So to do that, we're just going to add in a cube, hit G and Z to kind of bring it up here, tab into edit mode, and like we did before, just kind of line up our edges here with the reference image. And you'll notice that our reference image shows it tilted slightly. In fact, you can even tell here that it's added a little bit of an angle. Now we are going to be putting it at this angle, but as far as modeling it, it's much easier to leave it as straight on the axes as possible, because if I wanted to move this along the x-axis or in this direction, it's easy if I can just tell it to move along the x-axis rather than if it was tilted, the x-axis would be slightly moved, and it would be a little bit more complicated to pull it off. So that's why I always leave everything straight on the axes until it's done modeling. Then I adjust it to fit and rotate it around when I don't need to worry about those axes anymore. All right, enough of that rambling. We have this little indentation here where these, I don't know actually know what you call those things. These little triangle bits. There's a little indentation here, so we know we can go ahead and add some edge loops in here by hitting Control R, kind of line them up with where that's going to be sitting. Okay, I'm going to add one going down the middle here like this. I'm going to select both of these, and actually I'm going to select these corners here, turn the proportional editing. Okay. Select these four corners again. Turn the proportional editing back on by hitting O, or just going down here to the drop-down menu. And I'm going to scale those along the x-axis, turn up my influence a little bit, and use that to get that sort of rounded edge there, that rounded corner. I like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Go ahead and select everything. Or actually, let's just select this back edge. Move it out along the y-axis till we get about the thickness that we want. That looks pretty good. Okay, now we can grab this, these two faces on the inside, hit E to extrude, Y to lock to the y-axis, and just pull them in along the axis there. That gives us that little cut in for our little triangle bits. I gotta figure out what those are called. I sound like an idiot. Alright. I think I would know this as much as I play guitar. Alright, so we've got that there. I'm going to tab out of edit mode and hit Control 2 to add a subsurf modifier. And I'm going to add a couple edge loops in right away. First being along the outside edge to just sharpen those points up. So that looks really nice. Now I want to sharpen up our little cutaway here, which if I add these tighten them in here. That's not going to really make a big deal. But once I add these edge loops to tighten them up here, you can see it kind of ruins the flow of our curve here. So to fix this, I'm going to select these three edges here, hit Control E, edge slide, and just kind of slide them down a little bit. Do the same here, Control E, edge slide. Just a little bit. Maybe move this one up a little bit more. Okay, and that just helps to keep that roundness going. We'll do the same thing on this side. If I select the right three edges, Control E, edge slide, and just kind of center them in there. And the same here, edge slide. Okay, and that just, again, helps to keep that round shape looking a little nicer. I am going to add an edge loop in here and here, just to tighten up those corners there. Let's hit a smooth shader and see how we're looking. Alright, looking pretty good. I'm going to add an edge loop along the inside of this cutout, just to help maintain that nice sharp edge along here. And I like that, and that's going to work out just fine. Alright, so we've got a few other pieces here to throw on. First off, we can see we have some screws going along here. And they're kind of bulbousy, so we're just going to use the bulbous screw that we created for our pickups by selecting it, hitting Shift D to duplicate it, bringing it down here, and then just rotating it so that it's pretty close to flush. Something like this. And as far as the placement goes, we want to line them up basically where our strings are on our reference. So we'll just grab along the x-axis here, and then Shift D and move them along the x-axis, and just kind of line them up with the center points of the strings. Like so. Actually, you know what? I just thought of something. Before we do that, let's delete all the ones we just made, because there is a, if you look here, there's a little bit of a little deal that kind of hooks up between the screws and these little triangle bits. I'm going to actually model that coming out of our screw. So if we go into our screw, hit Tab to go into edit mode. Mine already has this back edge loop selected, but if it doesn't, just Alt-click on it to select it. Going to hit E and then S to extrude and then scale it down a little bit. And then E and Z to just pull it straight up, basically just like this. Okay, now I'm going to hit Shift D and X and duplicate those along this, matching up where our string, no, not delete, matching up where our string placement is going to be. Now when we add these little triangle seats for the strings, we'll have these in place already. Alright, so we got that good to go. Let's add in those little triangle bits. Gotta figure out what those are called. Alright, yeah, I'm going to pause this video real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, it's called a saddle. Now I don't sound like quite such a guitar ignoramus. Alright, so let's go ahead and model these saddles for our bridge. So to do that, I've just added a cube by hitting Shift A, adding in a cube, tabbing to go into edit mode, tabbing, is that a word? Hitting tab to go into edit mode, S, scale it way down, go ahead and leave edit mode and move this over here, which the reason I always leave edit mode when I'm going to be dragging or moving around an object is because I don't want to move the origin point relative to the geometry, where is if I was in edit mode and I just grabbed it, moved it, you can see it leaves our origin point here, which then if I tab out of edit mode, the origin point is there. If I go to rotate, it rotates around that point. It's just a hassle. So that's why I always tab out of edit mode when I'm editing or when I'm moving the object. At least I try to. I don't always do it, I'm sure, but it is a good habit to try to get into. Okay, so for the saddles here, I'm going to go back into edit mode, turn off my proportional editing, and I'm going to scale everything along the y-axis. I'm going to grab this edge here and pull just this edge along the y-axis, And with this edge selected, I'm also going to hit Control B just to kind of flatten it out, because you can see that it's got kind of that flat edge right on top here. So I'll go here, I'll grab just this one, just flatten that out just a little bit, and that looks pretty good. Alright, and that's all we're going to do for those. You'll notice that I do have it facing the opposite direction that it shows in the reference image. These saddles I actually replaced myself a long time ago, and I believe I put them in backwards because I have another guitar that has saddles that I didn't put in that are facing the other direction. So I'm thinking that I put them in backwards and that this is actually the direction they're supposed to be facing. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and grab this, move it over here, and actually I'm going to take the whole thing and scale it along the Z-axis just to flatten it out that direction a little bit. That looks a little better. Okay. I'm going to grab this and move it along the Y-axis so that it's kind of fitting on top of our little cylinder here that we extruded. Hit Shift D and just move them over here like this. And the reason I'm not using an array for this is because I want them to be at slightly randomized along the inside of this. So just once I get them all duplicated, just going to select each one, hit grab and then Z to lock them to the Z axis, and just sort of randomize their placement a little bit. It just gives a little bit more of an authentic look. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. I like it. Alright, so we got one other little deal here. We're going to add this little circular whatever it is. I don't know. I'm not looking this one up. But we're going to add it, even though I don't know what it is. And it also comes, it has this little, basically this part of the bridge here is, it slides down over the top of these two little posts here. And then these you can turn to adjust the height of the bridge on either side for some fine-tuning adjustments when it comes to getting it all, the intonation all set up all accurately, which is probably more guitar knowledge than you needed to know. But that is in fact what they do. So we need to model the little adjustment discs here and the posts that the bridge is sitting on. And we're going to model those out of one piece, believe it or not. So I'm going to add in a circle. I'm going to bump the vertices up to 24, and I'm going to rotate it by hitting R, X to rotate along the X-axis, 90 degrees, hit enter, move it up to about where we want it. I'm going to pull it out along the Y-axis just so we can see what we're doing. Tap into edit mode and scale it down till it's about the size that we want. We want it to be just a little bit bigger than the bridge itself in this piece. That looks alright. I'm actually going to move this behind the bridge so that it's just resting right here, because I want to extrude this back along the Y-axis. It's going to select both of these edges here, hit E to extrude and S to scale, and if I look through my first person and toggle wireframe, I can get it scaled about how I want it, because I'm going to be extruding these points to make this post. So I'm going to grab this one in the front, hit E to extrude, Y to lock to the Y-axis, pull it out about how far I want it, E, scale, pull it out along the Y-axis, E, scale, and W, merge at center, and that's going to merge that all those vertices there into one central vertice in the center of all of them, and then I'm just moving it out along the Y-axis just to help round it out. Okay, I'm going to grab this back point here. Why is that all scaled in like that? That's not how I want it. Oh, I know what I did. I scaled both of these in all directions, which included scaling them in along the Y-axis. So what I'm going to do is go to a side view mode. With those selected, going to hit S to scale, Y to just scale along the Y-axis, and then just kind of even it out, just eyeballing it. Alright, that'll work. Okay, now with this back edge loop selected, hit extrude Y, and just bring it down a ways. And this post is actually going to be going into the guitar body itself. And then I'm going to grab these two edge loops again, hit Control B to add a little bit of a beveled edge to them, and I'm going to scroll up once just to round it out a little bit nicer. There we go. Now if I add a smooth shader to this looks pretty good. I like it. Okay, so now we've got this piece done. I'm going to hit Shift D and X to duplicate it and then just move it along the X axis just to add another one on the other side. And there we go. This part of the bridge is finished. So I'm going to select all of the pieces, making sure I get all of them. Now that it's all done and modeled, we can just fit it to our guitar. So I'm going to hit G and Y to move it along the Y axis. And with this reference image, we can see that it's not resting flush against the guitar. It is raised up a little bit. So we're going to reflect that here by having it raised off. Maybe not quite that much. Something like that, I think, looks pretty good. And you can see now that we'll have our strings coming up, hitting these saddles, and then traveling downward at an angle to the bridge, or to the end of the neck, way up here, right down. But we will be covering that in part 3, so we're not going to worry too much about that right now. Alright, let's move on to the next piece of the bridge here, which is, now that I look at it, oddly harmonica shaped. So if you know how to model a harmonica, you're right on your way to getting this part done. If you don't, then we'll just cover what we need to cover. Alright, now for this piece I am going to be cheating a little bit because I'm not going to be modeling in some of the details that I feel are not necessary specifically for my own purposes. Basically, the way this thing is put together is inside here there are 6 holes that are going through this, which is what helps anchor the strings here. We have this little, you can kind of see these things here. These are little nubs, which I guess I could draw it for you real quick. Basically the way it works is you've got the bridge here, you have a hole going through the middle of it, like so, and you have the strings that are coming down from the front part of the bridge, going through the holes, and then there's a little nub at the end of the strings that anchors right here, and that's what holds the string in place. The more you know about how it's put together, the better. The more sense it makes when going to model it. Now, I am not going to be modeling this hole, partially because it's one of those details that I think you can get away with not modeling because you're not... Oh, that's cool. I didn't actually know that the grease pencil did that. How do you like that? Anyway, it's not going to be one of those details you're really going to notice, and we're going to kind of fake it in the front where the strings would be coming out, so that there's going to be a little indent here, kind of like there is in the back, this sort of inset area, but we're not going to actually model the holes because I personally feel that it's unnecessary. If you would like to model the holes, you are more than welcome, but for me, it's one of those details that I feel you can get away with not actually modeling it, and it'll still work out just fine. So, with that being said, we're going to model this harmonica-shaped piece minus the holes. Okay, so we're going to hit Shift-A, add in a cube, and just like we've done on every other piece so far, tab into edit mode, grab this bottom section, and just start lining it up. Like so. Grab this back face here, pull it out along the y-axis, and we can see here that this part doesn't look like it's quite as thick as this part. So again, we're just going to reflect that here. And and you may notice that I'm choosing to eyeball a lot of these dimensions. Again, it's one of those things. This is not meant to be a completely 100% accurate photorealistic guitar. This is meant to be just a nice 3-dimensional, slightly stylized version of a guitar. So I'm using a little bit of artistic license and exaggerating some of these proportions and whatnot to get the look that I want. If you would, I think I'd said this in my in the first part, if you would like to create a completely photorealistic, accurate guitar model, you can very easily get on Google and find actual blueprints of guitars and you know, really just accurately line everything up 100% in line with those blueprints if that's what you're going for. For me personally, it's not what I was going for with this model. It was meant to be, you know, a fairly detailed guitar model, but not a 100% accurate to the real world model. So anyways, with that being out of the way, if you're wondering why I'm eyeballing so many of these dimensions or proportions, that's why. Okay. So if we take a look at our piece here, we can see from the two angles that we've got a few things we need to set up in order to get this modeled correctly. One, we have this middle section here that's sort of raised and rounded. We have a little cutout here that's actually holding it in place around these large screws here. We have this inset area in the back, and we're also going to put one in the front to sort of fake the holes where the strings are coming out of. So we know what we have here, so let's get some edge loops set up in place to basically get ready to add in these details. So I'm going to hit Control R, add an edge loop in here, one here, and one here. Do the same on the other side, just kind of matching up along this. You know, I know we're going to need an inset area here, so let's just go ahead and add two edge loops here. And with those two selected, I'm going to hit S and Y and scale them on the Y-axis just to give us a little bit more width there. And I'm going to need an edge loop here along the middle for a few reasons. We can just go ahead and add that there. And this gives us all the edge loops we need to start adding in these details. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is add in this little raised section in the middle by selecting these two faces here, hitting E to extrude, Y to lock to the Y-axis, and just raising it up a little bit. And then jumping back to edge select mode, grabbing these two edges, hitting G and Y, and just pulling them back along the Y-axis to give us sort of that rounded edge there. Okay. Now for the notches cut out here, I'm going to select these faces here, hit X, delete faces, and that just leaves that notch there. Do the same thing on the other side, like so. X, delete faces, and now I can grab these edges here, and oh, actually, before I get too far, I see I'm going to run into an issue here. I need to add a couple of edge loops here on this piece, scale them along the Y-axis so that I can line them up with the edges here. But I'm just selecting these edges, hitting F to create the face in between them. Just like that. Do the same thing over here on the other side. Create this face, add two edge loops with Control R, scale those along the Y-axis, and then select these edges here, always making sure selecting the correct edges. I don't know how many times I've put faces on my object that shoot way off into nowhere because I ended up selecting the wrong faces or vertices. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to select this front face here for our indent, hit E and Z, just pull it in along the Z-axis a little bit. Do the same thing down at the bottom, E and Z, just like so. And with that, we've pretty much got this modeled. I'm going to hit Tab to leave edit mode. And this one, it's pretty rounded all over in various ways. We don't want this blocky look to it. So I'm going to add a subsurf modifier by hitting Control 2. And we can see we got a few places we need to add some edge loops. First off, we need to put one right here going along like this, which will tighten up the edges along the inside of our indents as well as the edge right here. And I'm also going to add edge loops like this to tighten up that corner, and then add an edge loop along the insides here to tighten up these corners along that. add a smooth shader, take a look around, see if anything looks weird or out of place. And actually, I think everything looks pretty good. I kind of like this. The one thing I do want to adjust, just for my own sake. So I'm going to turn on my vertex select mode, grab these two vertices here, scale along the x-axis just a little bit, just to kind of give this rounded, sort of rounded edge here that you see over there. Alright, other than that though, I think this looks pretty good. The only thing we need now are these large screws here, which are actually holding it in place, and very similar to on the other part of the bridge, has these posts that are actually going into the guitar body. So we'll model those really quick. And since there's screws and we already know how to make screws, I'm not going to walk you through this process because we're going to be doing it exactly like we made the other screws. So I'm just going to very quickly go through this, tabbing into edit mode. I mean, you guys are pretty much screw making experts at this point. You don't need me to hold your hand, but I am going to just very quickly go through it so you can kind of see what I'm doing as a quick refresher. Selecting these points here, and since this is just a, if we look at it, it's a very large screw, and the notch goes all the way from end to end. So I'm going to select these faces here and hit E, pull them out along the y-axis. Select all of these, E along the y-axis, and E and scale just to give that some depth. Actually, scale it along even more. Hit E and Y, and that's going to be our post that's going into the guitar body. Okay, I'm going to grab this edge here, hit Control B, and add a little bit of a bevel to it. And I'm going to do the same along the outer edge here. Control B, add a little bit of a bevel. Okay, add a smooth shader and an edge loop, or an edge split modifier. Adjust the angles till I get what I want. That looks pretty good. And line this up so that the post is actually resting inside of these notches. Hit G and Y, rest this screw right on the top there. Okay, hit Shift D and X and duplicate it along the other side. Alright, now we can grab this whole deal here and pull it in along the y-axis and line it up. And if we see here, we want to make sure to get this sort of upward angle to this bridge from this bridge. So when we move it down, we want this to be much lower because the strings are going to be coming out of this little inset here up to these saddles and then down to the neck from there. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I like how this is looking, guys. I hope you do too. Alright, so what do we got left? Well, nothing on this reference image, so we can go ahead and change this. So let's jump over here to the knobs, switches, input jack, etc. So I'm going to open up another reference image that I took of that part of the guitar. Okay. Now the thing about these knobs that you'll notice that is slightly different than what I have over here is you have sort of this shaped knob that is then wrapped or coated in this thick clear plastic. Now I tried several times to get this effect using cycles. I could never get it to look quite right, and so I eventually gave up, partially because it's really hard, and if Homer Simpson has taught me anything, it's that if something is hard, it's not worth doing. Just as a disclaimer, don't ever take any advice from Homer Simpson. That's terrible advice. Anyway, I couldn't get it to look quite the way I wanted it, and so I kind of opted. There are several different kinds of guitar knobs out there. This is not the only kind. So I kind of opted just for a more basic, solid knob that's doesn't have this coated plastic part. So we're gonna be doing that instead of this. So to do this, I'm going to add in a circle, bump the vertices up to 24. All right, rotate this along the x-axis by 90 degrees, move it up about where our knobs are, tab into edit mode, and scale it down to about the size of the knob. That looks pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to give it a little bit of this. You can kind of see the shape it has along the inside. It kind of goes in a little bit, up around here like this. I'm going to kind of go more for that shape so that it still is an interesting looking knob, more interesting than the knobs I actually made here. But it won't have this coated plastic. If you want to give this a shot and see if you can get it to come out right, feel free. If you do manage to pull it off, let me know how you did it, because I couldn't seem to get it to work. Anyway, I'm going to move this out along the y-axis in front so we can see what we're doing. Alright, so let's start shaping this knob. First I'm going to extrude along the y-axis a little bit, scale it in, extrude along the y-axis some more, scale that one in. Well, maybe not, because I want this to be, let's go and scale this one in quite a bit, and then scale this one in not too much, something like that'll look okay. I'm going to move it in along the y-axis, don't want it to be too long. Alright, something like that'll work. We'll hit E to extrude, S to scale it, to give it a little bit of a lip here, extrude it back along the y-axis, scale it a little bit, extrude and then scale, and then extrude back along the y-axis to give us this little center nub here, extrude, scale, and then I'm just going to hit W, merge at center to merge those vertices into one at the center, and just pull it out along the y-axis just to round it out a little bit. Something like that will work out just fine. And I'm also going to hit select this back edge loop here, hit E to extrude, S to scale, go down something like this, and then E and Y, and this is going to be the post that's going from the knob into the guitar body. Alright, so with all of this in place, I'm going to add a subsurf modifier by hitting Control 2, and that gives us an idea of where we need to add in some edge loops to clean up these corners here. I'm going to add one something like here. I want to add one here because I want there to be a pretty sharp crease right where this changes its angle there. Add one up here towards the top, one along the inside here, and then one down here like this. Let's take a look at that. I like that. I think that looks pretty solid. Alright, add a smooth shader, make sure we don't have any weird normals. Okay, now the one thing that's nice about this is, we have 4 of them that are exactly the same, so I'm just going to hit Shift D, move these out about where the other knobs are, and then one at a time move them back along the y-axis to fit on the guitar. And the reason I'm doing it one at a time is because our guitar body is a little bit curved at this point, some of these will be at different points than the others. Okay, and that looks pretty good. I like it. Alright, we got a few more pieces. I'm at 52 minutes. I'm going to try to wrap this up in just about an hour, so I hope it doesn't go too long. Like I said, trying to get all of this done plus the neck, it was a long tutorial. Alright, so for this piece here, for the input jack, we scroll this over here, we can get a better look at what we're looking at here. I'm going to do this in 2 pieces. So I'm going to start by adding a circle, leave it at 24 vertices, rotate along the x-axis by 90 degrees, tab into edit mode, scale it down till it's just on the just a little bit bigger than the nut here. Hit E to extrude, scale this in till it's about something like this. Hit E to extrude, Y to pull it out along the y-axis. E to extrude, scale it in, and then E, extrude it back in along the y-axis to give it a little bit of a thickness here. And I'm going to grab this edge, this outer edge here, extrude it along the y-axis, again just to give it some thickness. And I'm going to turn on Smooth Shader and add an Edge Split modifier, and we're going to call this piece good because it's a pretty low detail piece. We don't need a lot of super detail in there. Alright, but we do need this little nut here. So to do that, I'm going to add in a circle, and I'm going to turn the vertices down to 6. Rotate it along the x-axis, and you can see that we already have the shape that we want. So this is actually a pretty simple piece to make. Pull this out along the y-axis, where it's just sitting right about here. Tab into edit mode, E to extrude, and S to just scale it down. Something like so. And then I'm going to select all, hit E to extrude, and Y, and just give it some thickness. And that's pretty much it for our input jack. All it takes now is we'll just select everything, hit G, grab it, and this one to fit it on the body, since the body is a little bit rounded at this point. You need to do some rotating around just to get it lined up pretty close. Okay, you can take some more time and get it in there a little more perfect if you want. I'm going to call it good for the sake of the tutorial, because man, 54 minutes. Whew. Alright, let's do this switch really quick and then the pick guard, and we will be done for today. I know it's kind of a marathon, but let's do this. Alright, going to add in a circle, turn the vertices back up to 24, rotate along the x-axis, match it up a little bit. Oops, where'd it go? There it is. Alright, hit tab to go into edit mode, tab to go into edit mode. There it is. Starting to go a little crazy, guys. Scale this down. Let's move it out here so we can see what we're doing. And let's jump over here and check it out. Get a little better idea of what it looks like. I'm not going to worry about this little notched edging here, because again, it's a fairly small detail. So, especially for the sake of time, because we're running short. All right. So let's see. With this edge loop selected here, I'm going to hit E to extrude just a tiny bit, S to scale a little bit, E to extrude, Y, E, and then scale, and then E, Y, E, scale, bring it in back along the y-axis, scale that one down, and actually I'm just going to leave it just like that. Okay? And that's going to be this first piece, so we'll add a smooth shader and an edge split modifier to that guy. That looks pretty good. Now for this next piece, I'm going to start with a UV sphere. So I'm going to hit Shift A, add in a UV sphere. I'm going to bring the segments down to 16 and the rings to 8. That'll be fine. Rotate this by 90 degrees. Tab into edit mode. Scale it way down. Let's kind of fit it in this little notch here. Okay. Tab back in edit mode. I'm going to delete this vertice right here, select this outer edge loop, scale it up a little bit, and extrude our switch out of this. So we'll hit E to extrude and then just pull it out along the Y. E extrude, scale, E back along the Y to kind of create this lip around it. E and then scale, E back along the Y-axis and scale it up a little bit. And pull out another one, scale it down, and then E, scale, W, merge at center, and then just pull it out along the Y. Going to add a subsurf modifier to it, and see where we need some edge loops. We'll add one in here, and that's actually it. Okay. I want to pull this in a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. And now, since we have our origin point sitting right here, where the actual pivot point of this is going to be, if we rotate it, it pivots in a very natural way for the switch. So that's just kind of a handy little trick. Alright, so now we got this. We can move this back along the guitar body, which again, since it's on one of the curved parts of the guitar body, need to be a little bit more precise with how we fit it on there. Okay. And that's going to be good for that. We got 58 minutes, guys. Whew. Alright, let's see what we can do with this pick guard. Now, the pick guard is another one of those things that, you don't have to, you don't even have to include it. In fact, my guitar, I took the pick guard off. So, you know, if you don't want the pickguard on there, if you want to be just like this, and then you're done. See you next time. For those of you who do want the pickguard, I'll go through really quickly at least one method to make this. Alright. So we'll hit Shift A, we'll add in a plane, rotate it by 90 degrees along the x-axis. And this is one of the parts where, you know, you can be a little bit more creative with the shape. You know, kind of like with the headstock, you can kind of do your own thing with it. So I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently than you might expect, but basically just kind of stretching it out, extruding it out, making kind of the shape that I want. Okay. And I'm going to add a subsurf modifier, a level 1, and let's go ahead and again pull this out so we can see what we're doing. Just kind of round out the shape here. I'm going to select these 3 vertices, hit E to extrude, and then just right click just to leave them right in place and just create this sharp edge. Just like that. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and apply the subsurf modifier because I only wanted it to give me the shape a little bit better, but I want to be able to apply some, or to do some things here in a minute that I'm going to want the subsurf not to affect. Alright, so first off I'm going to select everything, hit E to extrude, Y, and just give it a little bit of a thickness, not a lot. Okay, I'm going to hit Control R, add an edge loop in right along the edge here, like so. And then with that edge loop still selected, hit Alt S and just pull it out to give it sort of a little bit of a lip. But I don't want that to affect this back side here. So I'm going to, oops, with all of those, with that edge loop there still selected, I'm going to hit C to bring up my brush select tool and middle click all the way around the perimeter here so that I have just these selected. Going to hit Scale, X and 0 to flatten them out, and then hit Enter. And then I'm going to hit G and X to pull them in along the X-axis. That way I have this edge is still flat, but I have this sort of sharp blade-like rim going all the way around, like so. Now I'm going to add another subsurf modifier, just a level 1. And I'm going to add a couple edge loops in here, one edge loop in right there, to keep that edge nice and sharp, just like that. Add a smooth shader so we can see what it looks like. Not sure I really like the smooth shading on that. I might leave it just flat. Yeah. Or actually, you know what we'll do? We'll add a smooth shader, and then we'll add in an edge split modifier. There we go. Turn that down. That way, this edge here maintains nice and sharp, but it still looks nice and smooth along this edge in here. And that's what we want. Okay. So with this in place, go and select it. We'll fit this along the body here, which this is kind of a tricky one because it's a flat object kind of fitted on a rounded guitar body. And it's just a little bit tricky to nail it down. Okay. I think that's going to work out pretty good. Alright. Let me pull it out along the y-axis just a tad. Okay. Now, before we're done, we need to add a couple pieces to actually connect it to the guitar. So I'm going to grab one of these corner screws here, hit Shift D, put one right there, Shift D, put one up in this corner, and then I'm going to put one down over here because there's going to be a little piece here that actually connects that to the guitar as well. Then go through each of these, hit G and Y, and just line it up so that it's actually sitting on our pickguard here, so it isn't just floating in the middle of nowhere. Okay, we might need to rotate them a little bit, but I'll let you guys do that. Alright, just about done. You can hit Shift A, add in a plane, rotate along the X-axis 90 degrees. And for this one, it's going to be basically just kind of a little strip of metal that fits in under the pickguard and then latches to the body right here. So I'm going to select these two here, hit E to extrude, and just kind of line them up about where they're going to go. Something like this. This edge we can pull in a little bit more. Okay, going to hit Control-2 to add a subsurf modifier, add an edge loop here, and a couple edge loops here just to kind of tighten up that corner. Add a smooth shader. And again, I'm going to apply the subsurf modifier and add in a solidify modifier to just give it some solidness. And then add in another edge split modifier to just smooth that out, adjust the angle until it's smooth the way I want it. Okay, there we go. And one final step, I'm going to grab one of these bulbous screws, hit Shift D, rotate along the Z-axis, just get it set up here so that this is actually connected to the guitar as well. Alright. Whew! Alright, well here we have the guitar body all finished. The hardware is all in place, and we are ready to move on and get the neck hardware and strings and final adjustments done, and then finally move on to the texturing. So I hope this wasn't too long. I know it's a lot of stuff to cram into a tutorial, and again, I think you'll understand why I split this one up. So hopefully there's no broken-hearted people out there that are just beyond all consolation. So that's it for this, and I really look forward to seeing you guys in part 3 where we finish up the hardware, and part 4 where we do the texturing. So until then, I will see you guys later.